And joining us on the phone now, as promised, Nolan Hemmings, a.k.a. Sergeant Charles Chuck Grant. How are you doing, sir?
Hey, guys. Good to be with you. It's good to be chatting.
How
are you?
It's fantastic to be chatting with you in conjunction with Band of Brothers Where Are They Now.blogspot.com.
It's good to be here.
You played Sergeant Chuck Grant.
I did.
He was in the weapons platoon, correct?
He was second platoon.
He was second
platoon. He was a staff sergeant by the end. So he had his own squad and stuff, and he was a really well liked guy. He was a bit of a gambler. Craps was his thing. Pretty tricky for us. We were on set. Filming obviously every day, but lots of time off, and but we never got into dice. I guess it's one of those things. I guess you need an area to throw the dice. I'm sure they must have found plenty of spaces when they were out there in Europe. So
that's my favorite game. I could sit down and play craps all day long if I have the right bankroll.
Yeah, that was his thing. He loved dice. He played craps a lot, and he was well known for taking people's money. He was very good at it, and he loved it. But instead of craps, which none of us were really that into, I guess we never really got the dice out. We all played poker on set. That's how we passed the time.
Nice. Well, let me ask you this question, because we've had so many different answers from all of the same questions that we asked these guys. When you were going through the casting process, we know that it's different for everybody. Did you read for Grant when you first came in, or how many people did you read for before they said, "Hey, you're Chuck Grant"?
Well, I think, something that, I know a lot of the other guys have mentioned too, is that when, and this is often the case, in castings, it can happen this way when you've got a big project and you've got a whole bunch of people who are who are going to be cast for it. There's a lot of roles to fill, and giving out a whole bunch of different sides for different characters can be a bit tricky. And also, oftentimes they don't want to release that much of the script into the kind of into the hands of people who may or may not be involved in the project. And lots of producers and people casting want to keep the scripts back. They did that with Lord of the Rings as well, and other films that I've been up for, where you read a kind of a role, and then they think, okay, yeah, we like what he's doing, we like his, in this case, accent, we like the look of him, and they match him up against somebody. And so most people, I think, read for Welch or Spears. There were a couple of parts, the sides were rolling out, and it was pretty much the same lots of sides for a lot of the guys in the UK who were being cast. So I did that. I just read, the sides I was given. It was kind of clear that, the roles would be jumping around, and people would be seen for different stuff going down the road. But initially, it was about just getting to know each of the actors. And, you got to remember that when word came to town that they were casting this in London, every actor, every single male actor, whether he was, there was a kind of age bracket that they were hitting. And a buddy of mine who I went to drama school with was reading off camera, and he was amazed at how many people were on the list to go through, to read. And they literally went through everybody. Everybody in town who was acting and who was between, say, 18 and 30, and maybe pushing it a bit, if you were a little bit older than 30. But he kind of said to me, he was like, when you come in, right, whatever you do, just make sure your American accent is shit hot. Don't practice it. And I'm half American. My mates in America call me a half and half. So I'm based a half and half, yeah. half American and half English.
I got it.
So
nice.
I went in there kind of having heard from him what they were looking for, and he said, don't say you're 30, say you're 29 or 28. Come in and just do American accent the whole time you're in, and and don't waffle or babble or talk about your life story. Just get in, be polite, do the sides, and get out. Because Meg was obviously seeing everybody. Meg Liebman, who's the casting director, and I went in and read for just read the sides that were there, and then we moved on to the next phase. So there are a whole bunch of pictures up on the wall. I remember the second time I saw Meg, loads and loads of pictures of all the different characters they were casting, who they needed to put a face to a name, and that was interesting to see all those different faces up there, all the real guys, the real guys who actually fought.
Now, when you saw Chuck Grant, did you say, "Oh my God, I'm looking in a mirror"?
Meg pointed him out to me. Actually, she kind of said, "I said, so which one are you thinking I'd be right for?" And she pointed out Chuck, and it was a good enough likeness. I think it's very hard to get spot on with anybody. It's hard to find a dead ringer, but there were a couple. Like Popeye, like Nick Aaron's character, he was a dead ringer for Popeye Wynn. Babe Heffron even mentioned it, as I know, Nick told you. But it was close enough, and she kind of gave me a little smile, and she was like, "Yeah, Chuck looks pretty good." But you never know until the last minute. You never really bank on getting a job until you're actually on set. That's what they say. Don't count getting a job until you're actually right there on the first day of shooting.
Now, you brought up the accent a couple of times. Since you're a half and half, did it come easier for you than some of the other guys?
Yeah,
or did you have to work on?
Yeah, the good thing about we had voice coaches. Everybody had voice coaches. We we had to have them. It's important that we kept on top of it and that certain little sounds didn't slip, because it's very telling, and it really does take people out of the moment if they hear a slip in an accent. But like I said, I'm half American. I spent a lot of time in the States. I've lived in LA. I've lived in other parts. I've lived in New York as well, and I had a voice coach, because it's always good to keep listening. Get somebody else's objective view in it, and somebody who is trained to do that. But the good thing about playing Chuck, as opposed to some of the other guys who had very thick regional accents to deal with, I was lucky enough to have somebody who had a fairly, I wouldn't say generic, but a fairly standard American accent, because Chuck was born in Los Angeles, and he was a Californian. So he didn't have a thick regional accent. He just had a standard American.
He had the standard Midwestern surfer
exactly.
style. But yeah.
Exactly. So no drawl, nothing too heavy, nothing like you would get in the Deep South or wherever, So
or Brooklyn.
The East, or Brooklyn, the East Coast, exactly, or even up in somewhere like Boston. Some of those accents are tough.
Right.
There's a lot of very specific sounds, and hats off to the guys who managed to get through that much, that many months filming with an accent, with a really really hard accent. But obviously, as we were made to keep our accents from the very first day we met in Hatfield Studios. That was it. It was like we were on call. We were like, you are your character. So that's it. You got to keep in your American accent. You call each other by your character names, and that stuck. We didn't let that slip too much. We kind of stick to that. Once we got into filming and we were moved down the road a bit, and some new guys were in, and we were giving them all shit, the whole time, because they hadn't done the boot camp, they hadn't been through what we'd been through. So we did go back to being ourselves a bit, especially when we were out all together in London.
Let's talk about your boot camp experience. Was that as easy for you as it was for someone like Jimmy Matteo, or did you have a rough go of it like Rick Warden?
Tim
Matthews.
Yeah, Tim Matthews, he suffered, absolutely. And George Khalil actually suffered too, quite a bit, because he was really ill a few times in the morning when we were doing those runs. He was at the back and he was being sick in the bushes and stuff, and he really suffered. A few guys did really suffer. Rick really suffered, Tim suffered. But, I think I'm somewhere in the middle, because Jimmy Matteo is just superhuman. He's the bionic kid, This guy is unstoppable. And I love, the stories about his childhood growing up in Brooklyn, wasn't it? Isn't it?
Yeah. Growing up and running the trails on the rooftops.
Running his
exactly.
trails.
Back in those days, that was street running, right? Or street jumping, whatever they call it.
Yeah.
And that is something that that now is a sport. But in the old days, I mean, we used to run around in London when we were kids as well, climbing scaffolding and going on roofs and stuff, as kids do when they're urban kids and they got nothing better to do. And that's what you get up to. And but it's pretty nuts doing all that stuff. And you've got to be very, you got to have a lot of courage, and you got to be fit. And Jimmy is super, super fit. And he likes to prove it too. He likes to show off.
Yeah, I love the Neil McDonough stories when he told him that he would just jump on him like a monkey and start pounding on him.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's a tough guy, So Jimmy, I think, excelled at boot camp in a way that other people were just kind of a bit in awe of. And then some others suffered. I was in the middle. I really was looking forward to boot camp. I didn't know what to expect, as none of us did. I mean, when we arrived, I don't know if you know the full story of how it all shook down, but we basically were picked up in a coach in London, in a central location. Everyone met on the coach. We all went out to Hatfield Studios, and when we got there, we had our civvies on, our civilian clothes, just our normal everyday gear, and we just thought, we're going to do read-throughs and whatever, and not a bit of it. We walked in, we met the cadre, and these guys were not fucking around. They were serious. It was one of those situations where you go as an actor and suddenly you realize very quickly, Christ, what the hell's going to happen next? What's going to happen to us? And lots of people were pretty terrified. I was actually quite excited. I thought, well, this is great. We're going to get stuck in and we're going to learn a hell of a lot. And they put us through our paces. We had to earn those wings that we got at the end of the 2 weeks at boot camp. We really had to earn them. And, they said, right, drop all your civvies. We couldn't take anything with us. We couldn't have newspapers, no mobile phones. We didn't even take our clothes. We literally had our uniform and our kit bag, and that was it. We got on a coach and we headed down to Longmoor training camp. And we lived and slept in barracks or outside in burnt-out buildings, for 2 weeks. And it was a really hardcore experience, but it got us to where we needed to be to become the kind of unit that Easy Company was. Those guys, by the end of the war, I mean, God, they were brothers. They and still are to this day. The ones who are still alive and with us. And that takes a lot to bring a bunch of actors together who all actors have they kind of think a lot of themselves, a lot of them, and they kind of think they're special and they want to be treated special, and they don't want to just be a number or just one of a unit. But it was amazing how we came together so quickly on that, and everyone was kind of up for it. A few people really suffered, getting up at 5 a.m. before it was light, and doing a 5-6 mile run every morning, and then calisthenics, and then assault course training, and then all the stuff we had to do all day long. Holding a fixed position, attacking a fixed position, attacking a tank, and flanking trenches and all that stuff. And it was like being at war without, thankfully, anyone getting killed. But it was terrifying at times. There were times. I remember a time when we were in. It was kind of about halfway in, and we had a bunch of trenches that we had to hold, and they divided us up. So you had blue bands around the wrist, around the shoulders, around the arm, where you had red. So 2 teams. And one team would go off, and the other team would stick in a position like along a tree line in some trenches. And I was with Ben Kaplan, Smokey Gordon, and a few of the other guys, and he had the 30 cal, and there we are. And we'd done all of our training, learning how to strip an M1 and learning how to fire an M1 and reload quickly, and and he'd been trained at the 30 cal and all that. And there had been a few promotions. What they were very clever about is that everyone was you couldn't even blouse your trousers or anything. You weren't a paratrooper. You went in there just as a private with nothing, with no experience. And excuse me. And they basically said, you got to earn everything that you get here. So the guys who were going to become, like Damien becoming Winters, getting promoted, and all the other officers and also the sergeants, etc. We had to earn those stripes. We had to work our way up, and we had to show merit. We had to do things that actually that Dale Dye and the other cadre, Freddie Joe Farnsworth and Stokey and various, thought was worthy of a promotion. And we got promoted in front of everyone in formation, standing there. And they would say, okay, and this would be after day 2 or 3. And, they give you situations where you could earn the merit that you needed to be promoted. But you had to prove it. You had to prove you weren't a complete idiot. You weren't going to lead these men into battle. You had to show some kind of intellect and some creativity and some courage and leadership. So, we were in this position. We had to hold the trench. And the guys just come flying over this hill. I mean, they're just muzzle flashes. They're just running at us. They've been told, obviously, by the cadre, just full force, full frontal attack, blazing at us. They were just muzzle flashes. Everyone was firing Tommy guns. They were firing the M1s at us, and we were just like, holy shit! And we sat there in this tree line, and it was like, Jesus Christ, your heart's pounding, you're sweating. You're like, fuck, my God, we're going to get killed. And, of actors, we've done training and stuff. Opening fire, the sound of those weapons and the clips pinging and the bullets flying out of the machine gun.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I was next to Ben Kaplan, and I'm leaning up against the mud, and I'm firing the M1, and ping, out goes the clip, and I'm reloading, and your gun gets jammed, and even the Tommy guns all got jammed. They were quite tricky, actually. They got jammed quite a lot. And when we were filming, that could be a problem, because you're trying to obviously keep things moving, but it's natural. It happened in war. It happens in filming. So there we are. But I'm there with Smokey Gordon. He's firing this 30 cal, and I've got my jacket slightly stuck. It's slightly sitting back off my shoulders, and my helmet's tipped a little bit forward because I'm kind of just looking under the brow of it to see who's coming, and I'm trying to keep low and aim and fire. And I really, in all these moments, I think all of us did feel like we were in a battle situation. This was not like playing fun actors, having a laugh, shooting guns. You felt like your life was in jeopardy. You felt like you could die. And that's just the adrenaline kicking in, right? It's a fight or flight reaction. And so there we are, fighting, holding the position. We know we can't move. We've got to stick together. And all these hot shells are coming out of the 30 cal, which is he is just absolutely hammering at them. And all these hot shells are going down the back of my jacket and down my back, burning the hell out of me.
Darn right.
So, I'm sitting there just that was my first real experience, I think, of what battle must have felt like. But it really taught us a lot. I think being in, people hit walls. We all had to kind of hold each other up. Captain Dale Dye was amazing at the way he kind of kicked our asses every day, absolutely hammered us, with sleep deprivation, with having to do press-ups at the slightest thing you did wrong. We had to have our boots absolutely mirror shined.
Now, do you have a Dale Dye impersonation?
Horse cock! And they gotta rip off their head and shit down their neck.
That's an awesome impression.
That's pretty good.
He's got a lot of great lines, Dale, and he's a great man. He was like a dad to us.
Aww.
He was like a father figure, and he really took us in, and he did kick our ass through the whole of the shooting.
Yeah, that's his job.
Sorry, all of the boot camp, I mean. But he softened. Because every night we would have a couple of hours where he'd be telling us all about what was going on in the 40s and what the Second World War would have been like and what these guys would have gone through. And he was making it real for us, and he made it real every day in the way that he pushed us. But he gave us great reward, and that is what a great leader of men does. He pushes you to your absolute limit, and when you think you haven't got any more, he pushes you some more, and he gives you total shit for it. But then when you go beyond that point, where you break through those walls, because that is the difference between men like Easy Company and just men, guys who can go out there and could win a war against Hitler and against the forces of evil, which were... it's a very full-on time, the Second World War. At that point, all of Europe was covered in Nazis. It was no joke. And the paratroopers were an elite force, but they were not. They were kind of. They were just a bunch of guys who were really tough, and had enough grit to say, yeah, chuck me in the middle of the night behind enemy lines where I'm completely cut off with almost no stuff. If you had to fly light, you couldn't throw a guy out with a bunch of stuff. you had, the kit that you had with you. But as far as artillery support or anything like that, you had nothing. So you had to fight your way through the enemy lines.
Yeah, I think that's one of my favorite Winters quotes is when, God, I can't remember what episode it was, 8 or 9, somebody said something about being surrounded. And he's like, hey, we're paratroopers. We're always surrounded.
Yes.
Exactly. And this was the first time they ever used paratroopers in warfare. The Germans had done it before in Crete. And the Russians didn't do it. Actually, didn't use any in the Second World War, really. But this was the first time the Americans had put together a division of paratroopers, and they did it. They actually set it up 2 years before Chuck Grant actually signed up for the paratroopers. Was when they first set a place to do it. Fort Bering, I think it was, and that's it. Those guys were hardcore. Some of them. There was all sorts of guys from all different walks of life, but they were tough. They were the Jimmy Madias of this world. And they were a bunch of tough guys. And they didn't care about being thrown in behind enemy line. They didn't care about the comforts. They were like, get us in there and let's do it. And to make us, as a bunch of mamby-pamby actors who, go off and get pedicures or manicures or whatever the hell we do, wear moisturizer. To make us into those guys, it took a man like Dale Dye to do that. No one else, I don't think, could have done it the way he did, because he made men out of us. He really did, and in a way that I don't think anything nowadays would challenge us in the way that those men were challenged in the Second World War. That's for sure. Because we are honoring the lives of men who died fighting in that war. And there were millions of them. We just played one small company of guys in a very big picture. But these were important guys. They were paratroopers, and they were very much involved from D-Day on. And the war had been going on for a long time before that in Europe. And obviously, to be able to play those guys and play them well enough and give them enough gravitas, give them enough, enough weight, enough truth. But actually, when you look at the piece, it's a real ensemble piece, and there's lots of times when you don't see somebody for a while, then they pop up again. But there's a consistency throughout that all of these guys, whether they're right in the frame of camera, saying some dialogue, or they're running through a field with a bunch of their buddies, and you haven't seen them properly for another episode. We were all in it the whole time together, supporting each other through every moment. And the filming was grueling, it really was. It's not like we finished boot camp and then it was all, martinis around the catering truck or whatever. It's just like we were really working our asses off every day. Long hours. People got trench foot and stuff, from just standing around in the soggy mud in your boots.
Let's talk about those long hours. Were there any shenanigans or pranks that were done?
Oh yeah, I mean always, when you get a bunch of guys.
What did you do?
Well, Dexter and I've got a lot of very good friends from the shoot. Some of whom I knew before. Bart Rispoli, who played Tipper, and Shane Taylor and Ezra Godden. Shane was Doc Rowe, and we all went to drama school together in different years, but I knew those guys before. And Doug Allen, who played Moore, and Michael Fassbender as well. We were neighbours. We lived in the same neighbourhood in London. But, a bunch of the guys, Damien and Rick, I've seen since and, consider them good friends. And Matthew Leach I got on very, very, very well with. Ross McCall. And Scott Grimes I actually knew in America when I was living in LA. But yeah, Robin Lang and Colin Hanks even, who was there for just a couple of episodes. He and I did a lot of stuff together. I think the thing about having such an amazing group of guys for that long, we did 2 weeks of boot camp, which really got us to know each other. We really did bond, especially because we were doing, guard duty, stuff at night, sleeping out in those burnt out buildings and night patrols and everything else. So we really did spend every waking hour and, sleeping in very close proximity as well in dormitories. Or kind of cuddled up, trying to keep warm in these freezing buildings, all lying in a row. So when you have that much time with people, you really do bond with them in a way that you wouldn't otherwise. It would take years to get to know someone in the way that you do in that short time. So because we became so close, and we did become this group of really close mates, it was a very natural thing for us all to play pranks on each other. Now, Dexter and I, we used to have some fun and do silly things. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I think some of the funnier ones, definitely the Yanks pulled quite a lot of pranks. I know that there was a pissing in somebody's boots episode as well, and then all sorts of little things like that the whole time. And you had to keep your rifle with you the whole time. You had to keep your weapon with you, whether that was the 30 cal or whether it was a Tommy gun or an M1. So the one thing that I don't think anybody ever did, which is very interesting, and I don't remember a time where it did, so correct me if I'm wrong, but no one ever messed around with anybody's weapon, with their rifle or their, or the 30 cal or anything else, which is very telling, because that is something that was drummed into us from the very beginning. It's your life. This is what keeps you alive, and you had to have it with us the whole time. And if ever there was one found, that serial number had a name next to it, your character name, and if your weapon was found laying around somewhere, boy, you were in the biggest shit ever. A shitstorm, literally, from the cadre. You'd be doing hundreds of press-ups with your hands in a diamond. So...
Yeah, I think that shows tremendous respect. Not only for each other as actors, but the men that you were portraying. The fact that you respected the weapon that kept these guys alive and did the job that nobody else wanted to do.
Yeah, and while we're on the topic of weapons and a little bit on the topic of boots. Now would probably be a good time to bring up some questions that we have from some of your fans. Also about, boot camp, things like that. For example, I have two right here. Anthony from Canada. He wanted to know how long it took you to get used to your boots. And Paige from Ohio has a really interesting question. Have you ever handled a weapon before doing this project?
Yeah, I mean, to answer the second question first, I have, in work I've done and in life, fired weapons, used weapons in shoots. I've been shooting with shotguns, with rifles, and so I know what that feels like. I've fired live rounds, and I've shot food and eaten it. Rabbit and what have you, birds and stuff, pheasant, and it's they're like a shotgun has a lot of kick, but these weapons we were using, the Tommy gun and the M1, they have a recoil on them. It's not like you're just firing nothing. It's not like you're firing air. Mm-hmm. You don't have a projectile. It's the only difference, but everything else is the same. So you're firing a blank, and that muzzle flash is coming out the end, so it's got to look real. But they do have a bit of a recoil. So it does feel lifelike, but it's you forget about that. I mean, I think you just feel like you are shooting a real weapon and firing real rounds when you're in the thick of it. I remember one night when we were doing the night patrol. I think it's called Night Patrol or something. Last Patrol, it's called, I think. Mm. And we've got this situation where we've got a whole bunch of guys. It's the middle of the night, and there's lots of stuff to set up. So there's plenty of time waiting around for the set to get reset. If we've shot it once and all the mortar pots have gone off, they have to refill them. They're full of like polystyrene and bits and bobs. It looks like chunks of rock and cement flying around, but it's actually quite light. And you've got all the guys, on the other side in German outfits, in German uniform, and they're all hanging there. And they're all jumping up and down before the cameras go, and they're waving and saying, I'm going to get you, I'm going to get you. And, you're laughing at them and you're pointing back. But when the camera's rolling, you're in the thick of it, that's all gone. Suddenly you are absolutely in the moment. And you run for your life, and you're shooting, to save your life and to save the life of your fellow men in your squad or in your platoon or however many guys are over there. It's an amazing thing that kicks in. It's a complete and utter preservation thing, a life preservation thing. It's automatic.
Yeah.
And that was an incredible feeling, to just feel that sense of life and just protecting your men, looking after each other and fighting for your life. And you get caught up in that when you're filming. I think, because we filmed for so many months, if it had been a shorter shoot, you really did a lot of things really bedded in. We did boot camp. That was very intense. Then we got into the filming regime, which was also very intense. But then you get bedded into who you are, your character, how you fit within the rest of the platoon, and also the company. So, because you got your guys in your platoon, you got your guys in your squad even. So it breaks down into smaller groups, but overall, the whole company together, you have a sense of belonging. You have a sense of being a part of that company, and that who you are. Me in this case, Chuck Grant, playing poker and with Dexter and whoever. That really beds in after a while, and that's the point. That's what you want. You want to really feel you can just turn on your character in a second. Which takes time to build up, some people get there quicker than others. Some people use methods, some people use other techniques to get to the place they need to be for their character to come easy to them as soon as the cameras roll. And I think that's really important. I think that's what shows more than anything else, this long shoot. By the end, we were not only exhausted, but we just knew each other and ourselves so well as those people. We just knew exactly what to do at any moment. You could have made a scene. You could have just said, okay, we're just going to shoot an episode where you all just improvise. We're going to put you in different situations and just improvise, just make it up. And we would have done it, and we would have done a brilliant episode because, it would have been real. It would have been like, okay, we've got to attack that position. All the people's rank would have been right. Everybody would have behaved in a certain way. Everyone would have said, yes, sir, no, sir, 3 bags full, sir, because that's what we were trained to do. So that's an amazing achievement by the guys who made it.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Now, did you like the boots?
Yeah, the boots. So the boots question, I love my boots. Some people really struggle. I know Tipper really struggled with his, Bart Rispoli did, and a few others did. But I used to, when I was a kid growing up in London, I used to wear Doc Martens a lot, 18-hole Doc Marten boots.
Were you a punk rocker? Did you go around
No, not really.
Stuff?
No, I wasn't like that. I kind of wanted to be. I kind of probably fantasized that I was. I cut my hair really short and wore ripped jeans and Doc Marten boots with the jeans rolled up and stuff, when I was a kid. But I was young. I was like 10, 11, 12, that kind of age, doing that. And me and a few mates, that's what we got into. But so I always liked boots like that, jump boots. And so when I got my Corcorans, I was like, oh, these are perfect. I love these. They're amazing. They're a great pair of boots, really well made, beautiful color, and they needed breaking in. And I've had a bit of experience of breaking in boots before, and lots of people did different things, as I know they've mentioned, like dipping them in water and stuff. And I didn't sit in the bath or anything like that. I just wore them. I just wore them in, and they got wet because it was wet in Longmoor. I did a lot of polishing, and the more polish you put on there and dubbing and stuff, dubbing is really good for softening leather, and you can put it on the inside as well. It's not great for socks.
What's dubbing?
Dubbing's like it's like a wax, like a clear boot wax.
Oh, okay.
So you can put that stuff on. And then you can put on the polish.
So it's kind of like Neat's foot oil for baseball mitts.
Yeah, exactly, and it just softens leather, so you can put it inside as well, like I said. But it's not great on your socks. But of course, your socks are ruined anyway. We had these thick 1940s wool socks that itch like hell, especially up the calf. And when they've been in there for a good few hours, like a day and a night, if you've been out on night patrols or whatever, they start to really hum and itch. And so I put like dubbing inside the boots. Now, some people use Vaseline. That's another thing that works. But once my boots had worn in, it took a good few days to get them there and lots of blisters. Once you got to that point, then it was like they were a second skin. They just were soft, supple, and perfect for the job. They just really protect your ankles. If you didn't have boots like that doing the stuff we were doing, you would have certainly a ripped or broken ankle. You'd rip a muscle, you'd tear a ligament, something like that.
Now, do you still have your boots?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I've still got my boots, absolutely, yeah. And I've still got a bunch of stuff, actually.
Oh, all right. Well, that's next.
You should probably share with some of the guys that walked away and you're like, you know what? I didn't take a thing with me.
Well, that was more fool them because
exactly.
Because, I was very proud of the stuff that I wore. I was very proud of the character I played. I was very proud of, and I know we all were. I'm not saying they weren't because they didn't take a jacket or whatever. We all were. But I wanted something to remember that by and something to show my kids, when I'm 80. And, I can say I didn't fight in the Second World War, but I sure made a good go of looking like I did in a show that I'll show them, And I've got two kids, and my boy is already showing signs of loving World War films. So there we are. So I basically walked away with my jacket, and I had two jackets actually that I came away with. I was given one by the main costume guy, and on the back of it, and Rick Warden got a special one as well, which was a T-shirt with the parachute and the wings on it, kind of faded. Right. And there was a jacket that the costume guy gave me. That was the same insignia on the back, and I wore it. I didn't really wear it that much in the shoot, but I kept it, and I've got that still. I've got the original jacket that I wore in most of the shooting. I've got obviously the stripes and everything on them. I've got all the pins from all the different things that we did, Market Garden and Normandy, the D-Day landings. I've got the wings. I've got 2 M1 clips with full rounds. In fact, there's a picture that you've got of me. It says Chuck on it, and basically everything you see in that picture on me, I have.
Nice.
So I've got 4 decommissioned grenades. I've got the ammo belt. I've got a rubber 9mm and a holster.
Nice.
I've got a rubber bayonet knife for the leg as well. I've got the trousers. I've got the boots. I've got the socks. I've got the scarf. I've got everything except the helmet and the M1.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
That's awesome. Did you get any of those dummy grenades?
Yeah. I've got 4. The ones that you see in that picture, the 4 decommissioned. I have them.
I'm looking at that picture right now from what you sent me earlier.
There you go. You see that stuff? I've got the 4 grenades on the front there, the ammo belt you see there, the 2 clips on my belt. that I've got.
Did you just turn your?
How did you procure all these items? You just walk off with them on your person.
I'm thinking you put a trench coat on.
Yeah, exactly. I just put a big coat over the top and walked out. No, I had a bag. I had a bag with me, and I was like, and also Joe was cool with it. He's like, you guys have worked really hard. Why don't you just take, if you want that, go for it. So it was fine. Yeah. So has anyone talked about from the interviews? Has anyone talked about Dale Dye's night patrol stuff, like when we had to learn our 11 general orders and all that? Has anyone gone through that?
Detail.
Not in enough detail.
We did get to ask him if that was his actual kettle, and he did confirm it was his kettle.
Yeah, that was his kettle, yes. Absolutely. And the guys were absolutely shitting themselves that they thought they might lose it.
Yeah.
No, I mean it was. There's a moment in the diaries where Donnie says to camera, he looks at the camera after they've found the kettle, and he's like, "Blind luck." That's what that was.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it is so funny because it was so true. They really. They did do a good job of looking on the map and stuff, but actually it was completely by luck that they found that thing. And I know that if they hadn't, of course, he would have found it himself. Captain Dale Dye would have found it, but he would have given them such shit for fucking up the mission, So, but yeah, we had to learn. I mean, God, all the stuff we had to do, like the diamond-handed press-ups, like I said before, and the caterpillar press-ups and the atomic sit-ups and all that stuff. That's really worth watching to any of your viewers out there who haven't seen the diaries. It's really worth watching because they are great, and they really give you an insight into certainly what it was like, for us at boot camp, the camaraderie, the togetherness of everyone. Like, if one man falls, we all fall, and we'll pick him up, but we all get, we're all in it together, kind of thing.
Yeah.
In the sense of, certainly in the with the caterpillar push-ups, there were a couple of guys who just couldn't quite make it, and so Neil McDonough was up there. He was like, "Come on, let's switch you around with somebody lighter so you can lift them." Because we were all trying to achieve something together, which is what overall we were doing with the whole project, with the whole of the show. The whole shoot was about us achieving something together. We couldn't do it. If one man fell, then the rest of us, we had to get together and pull him up, because, you know, it was a long shoot. Lots of people hit walls. Lots of people, you know, missed being at home, especially the Yanks. You know, so that was the whole point of it. And, you know, he's brilliant at that. Captain Dale Dye is just incredible at being able to bring that to the table and to really show everybody what it means. You know,
and you know, once again, you guys did everything. You achieved everything that you set out to achieve, because there has been nothing made that has that's been like this, that's been as good as this, that's that's survived the test of time. And the simple fact is, you know, the coming together as your own band of brothers after the
that's
shoot.
The great thing. Yeah, that's the great thing about it.
You know, you don't hear a lot of stories about the Saint Elsewhere barbecues every year.
Yeah.
You know, or ER barbecues every year. It doesn't happen, man. You got the Band of Brothers, though. Everybody knows you guys get together in America every year for a barbecue over at Cudlitz's place.
Yeah, no, and it's, you know, what the tragedy of that. I mean, there is a tragedy to it, because we are divided by a huge pond of water. And the sad thing is that if that divide wasn't there, we would all be at that barbecue every year. You know, there's no question that 90% of the guys who were in the show, who were like the main characters, who were the whole way through together, would be there. You know, the only reason that we Brits, sadly, you know, but some of us have been out there, some of us have done it because they've been in LA, looking, you know, going out there for work, or some have moved there, like Ross. You know, he's there permanently now, and a few of the others. But it's a real shame that we're divided by such a, you know, huge distance, because it would be great for me personally anyway. I would love to see those guys more often than I do, because we really did go through something together that is very special. And, you know, I think that it's a real shame that I have personally have been able to get over there, you know, because I've been here every year when it's happened. I've been in the UK. I've only been to the States twice, actually, since we finished Band of Brothers. Once I was in Yellowstone, which is not exactly down the road from, you know, up the road from Michael's house. And I was with my family and stuff, and it was the wrong time of year for the barbecue anyway. And another time I was there for a premiere, but I wasn't in LA. I passed through LA, and it was again the wrong time of year. It was winter, so yeah, I do miss them. I would love to see them and you know, go back over some of the old stuff. I know they've done it for years, but you know, it'd be good to just catch up with them all and, you know, see their kids and see them and just, you know, just reconnect.
That's one of the big things that everybody talks about, is how you know, 10 years ago when they first started doing the barbecues, they've got to watch entire families grow up. You know, from the 8 and 9 year olds that were running around, who are now, you know, in college.
Teenagers. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's, you know, 10 years is a long time when you're a kid. A lot happens in 10 years. You know, when you're going from whether it's 2 or 3 or 10, you know, the big changes in a decade. And that is amazing. And to see the guys, you know, who, you know, some of whom didn't have kids. I didn't have kids when we filmed that together. I wasn't even married yet, but I've now got 2, you know. So it's a very different thing. So, yeah, I would love to see them. I mean, I love them all dearly. They're a great bunch of guys. I had an absolute blast working with them and meeting them and getting to know them and going through those experiences and sharing that with them. You know, that's something I'll take to the grave. So, you know, I would love to reconnect with them, and I hope to at some point.
Well, and we know that there's always been some sort of talk about having a UK get-together, but it seems that nobody can actually get it organized enough to where everybody can get there.
What we need to do is we need to get all the guys who work together, who are in the UK, to just get together. You know, I've seen Dexter loads since. You know, Dexter and I played poker quite a bit in the last 10 years. At tournaments and things. I've seen Damien quite a bit, not so much recently, but when I was still living in London, I moved out of London about 4 years ago into the country, and, you know, my life's quite different now than it was when I was living in town. But, you know, I've seen a lot of the guys, and we just have never put it together that we all have a reunion.
Since you knew so many guys from going to school with them and some of the other projects that you worked on before Band of Brothers. Did you get close to anybody new on the set?
How do you mean? People who came in after boot camp and stuff? Because I don't know if anyone's talked about that, but that was a very interesting experience.
Well, no, I was, just any of the actors. Did you because you already knew a bunch of these guys? So did you?
Well, I knew Bart, I knew Shane, and I knew Ezra, and who else had I come across? I mean, people I really ended up close to. I hung out a lot. It's very hard because we were all really close all the time, and you kind of would spend time with somebody and then you spend time with somebody else. But people I've been in touch with and close with since. Tim Matthews I haven't seen for years, but he lives quite near me and we've tried to reconnect a few times. He played Pinky, and there's a good picture actually of him and me together when we're getting ready to get on the planes and fly and do the landings, which you've got. Then. Yeah, Robin Lang. I spent a lot of time with him. Damien and Rick, like I said before, they're good pals. Ben, and I've been to things with them after Band of Brothers. We went to various parties together, and I've been and seen Damien in his play, and we kept in touch. Ben Kaplan as well. Doug Allen I saw for a while afterwards. He went out with an ex-girlfriend's sister for a while, so we saw each other quite a bit. He lived near me as well. Dexter, like I said, Matthew Leach, who else? Nick Aaron, he and I saw each other afterwards. Adam James I saw a bit afterwards as well. So there's quite a few.
Well, and that's pretty much what all the guys have been saying, except for Kudlitz. He doesn't like anybody.
That's right.
Now,
I think someone else I got on with really well, who I really thought was great, and like I was saying before, people who came in after boot camp and after the first, because obviously the reality in the actual war was you were trained up, you flew in, you jumped behind enemy lines, a whole bunch of your friends in your company got killed. And that was true across the board, as we all know. It was a pretty devastating blow to the troops, D-Day. There was a lot of casualties, a lot of deaths, and I think once you've been through that, and then a bunch of new guys come in and they haven't been through that at all. They've had nothing. They've been back home, picking their nails and eating pie or whatever. You kind of have a slight, there's a little bit of a kind of animosity there. There's a bit of kind of, who do you think you are, you little upstart? And what I noticed, what we all noticed, is that any of the guys coming in as replacements really got quite a lot of shit from us. The guys would play tricks on them, tell them the wrong stuff, doing the wrong stuff, and they were quite slightly isolated for a while. It took them a while to actually win our respect. And that was a really interesting dynamic to see on set, not just in the filming, but on set. You would really get a sense that people who were coming in, I was like, oh man, I wouldn't want to be that guy, Jesus Christ, because we were all just completely bedded in with each other by then. We were just really solid friends, and had worked very hard and gone through boot camp and suffered quite a lot.
It's a very distinct case of art imitating life.
Absolutely, and that was the point, of from Spielberg and Hank's point of view, and Captain Del Dye and the cadre to get us there, and that was really visible when new recruits came in, and some handled it better than others. I don't know if you've managed to get hold of Tom Hardy, but he got a lot of stick when he showed up. I remember the first day, Tom's done brilliantly. Tom's a fantastic actor, by the way, and he's had a great career since, and deservedly so. And he came on set with his shirt open, his jacket wide open, his his t-shirt was showing underneath, and that took, if you're going to stand around looking like that, you had to earn it. Most of the guys were still keeping some sort of appearance because it was the 1940s.
Yeah.
And he had his dog tags hanging out. I think he had a red bandana or something around his head, and like he was in Vietnam. It was hysterical to see. He literally walked on set like kind of dragging his rifle and looking all cocky and swaggering in. It was a hell of a thing to walk into all these guys who've been working together for 7 months or whatever it was, to try and deal with that. So he clearly had his angle. And he came in looking, and he was really young too. He was only, I guess he might have been 18 or something, 19. But anyway, he came in looking like he was in Vietnam, and just got the biggest ribbing ever. You know, he really got laid into by everyone. But there were a lot of guys who came in later on who did struggle to connect, and I think some of them were in for such a short time that sadly we didn't really bother trying. You know, we were just like, look, you know, you're only going to be here for 2 weeks, we're just not going to bother making the effort. Because a lot of the troops, what really happened in real life is the green troops came in and they would be dead within a couple of weeks. Just literally they would come in and their number would be up and everyone would see it, and you just keep clear of that guy, because you know if you're standing near him you might be the one who gets it too. And so in a sense, from their point of view, the real guys, you could see why they would slightly keep arm's length with the new guys, with the new recruits. And sometimes they'd take them under their wing and say, hey, look, I'll look after you. But at that point, it's kind of, you know, you just got to try and look after yourself, you know, and look after the buddies who you've been with all that time. You haven't got room to kind of take in more.
Hey,
Sorry.
I want to, at this point in time, I want to invite and say hello to Ross Owen, the man behind the entire the entire interview series that we're doing. He's joining us on Skype from Scotland. Ross, how you doing?
I think I'm here.
Yay!
There he is. Ladies and gentlemen, Ross Owen, the man behind Band of Brothers Where Are They Now .blogspot.com, the consummate professional, the producer. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Oh, fantastic. Nolan?
Hey, Ross. Good to speak to you, mate. How are you?
Hi, Nolan. Great to have you on the show, mate. You had a prominent scene, if I recall, in Breaking Point, the concentration camp scene.
Yeah, where we walk into the camp. It's me and Shifty Powers, I think. This is the point, really, in the whole series, where suddenly the reason why we're fighting becomes real. And I think, you know, from our point of view, as Easy Company, as we were coming to that point in the filming, it was a really moving episode because it made everything so real. Suddenly, instead of the enemy, here we are looking at the victims of what Hitler did and what he was about as a man. And it was so, none of us really saw it beforehand. We were kept away from it, and I think deliberately also we didn't want to see it. We wanted it to be a surprise to see the very first day we shot there, so that emotion was real. You know, so it was really tangible. You could really feel it on all of us, and it was just mind blowing. It was mind blowing. You know, coming out through that forest, and it's the same forest where they filmed the opening sequence in Gladiator, where they have that massive battle with the barbarians. Mm-hmm. And, you know, they cleared a whole area where they built the concentration camp. And then they had a whole load of actors in there who were emaciated, you know, who had either starved themselves for the role or more likely had just been cast because they were particularly underweight. And... Mm-hmm. And, you know, and it was harrowing because they were obviously made up as well, lots of shadowing on the ribs and under the eyes. So they all looked so skeletal. And then there were also animatronics as well. And some amazing animatronic work went into some of these, some of the people that we saw. One of them being carried, which is in a photograph, actually, which you've got. There's one where this person's being carried by presumably a relative or a friend. And it's an animatronics dummy, but it looked completely real. Even its head turns and the way it looked at you and blinked. And it was just horrifying. It was basically a skeleton with skin hanging off it. And me and Shifty walk up to this. And, I mean, I couldn't, you know, I didn't have to act anything. I couldn't stop the tears coming. I was literally choked up. My heart was pounding. My chest was tight. And I'm just starting to you know, I'm having to hold back too many tears and stuff, because obviously these people we're looking at are suffering. And it was really intense. And I think for us, all of us as actors, and also, playing these roles, it suddenly made sense of why we were there, why we were fighting this war, why men we loved had died, in the sense of the storyline, obviously. And very powerful. It's one of my favourite episodes.
I think it's a great history lesson as well, Band of Brothers, for people who are naive and ignorant to what these guys did. And I'm one of them.
For our American listeners, he said naive and ignorant.
Sorry, am I speaking in Jockanese again?
Well, you said naive and ignorant.
That's okay. I mean, we like it.
Have you seen, Ross, have you seen in the diaries, there's a very funny moment where one of the costume guys is talking us through on camera, talking Ron. And it basically has a subtitle that says something like, "This man is explaining the uniform in a thick Scottish accent." It's quite a funny moment.
Yes, I do remember that. The boot camp diaries. But yeah, I mean, it's been 10 years now. Does it feel like 10 years since the show?
Well, I mean, a lot's happened to all of us in 10 years. God, life goes on, doesn't it? But I think one of the amazing things about it is that over 10 years it has really stayed with us. I mean, for many people it's been the highlight of their career. The experience, if nothing else, the experience of it is unbeatable. You're not going to have that kind of experience again in a shoot as an actor. And I think it's a seminal piece of work, and for us to be involved and for us to have been a part of it and to have created it with everybody else is a real honour.
Did you suspect it was going to be really big when you were actually filming it?
When we first, you put the name Spielberg and Hanks to something, it's going to be big. I mean, there's no question about that. And everybody, as I said earlier, in London, were vying for position to get into that casting. It was the hot thing in town. Everyone was talking about it, and everyone wanted to get in there to be seen for it. So there was definitely a buzz. And of course, when we were filming it, there was no doubt. It was very funny because all the guys from the States were over and all of us lot in it. There was a buzz in town through the whole 7-8 months while we were filming at Hatfield, and people out there in London knew about what was going on, and whenever we went out in a big group, they knew that it was the Band of Brothers crew, or the cast rather. And I think you did have a sense that it was going to be an amazing project. I think the first time for a lot of us when we really realized the level was when we saw some of the sequences played back. So especially some of the battle sequences, because they are epic to watch, and being in them also was a pretty epic experience, because it was lifelike, for us filming it and for people watching it, and that is echoed in the responses that the veterans had when they saw it on Utah Beach at the end of our when we had the 57th anniversary of D-Day, and that memorial's at the beach where we showed the premiere of Band of Brothers, and all the guys were there. We had Powers was there, Lipton was there, Garnier, Babe Heffron, Richard Winters, the real guys. There was a lot of them there, and for them to turn around to us and say, they were in floods of tears. They watched the drops, and those sequences where people are jumping out of those planes and hitting the ground before their chutes are open because they had to fly low because of the fog, which is what happened, and planes just blowing up left, right, and centre from flak. Guys standing in the doors ready to jump, and just the plane being on fire, or guys jumping out of the plane that's on fire and they're on fire. These balls of flame just falling to the ground. That is so harrowing to watch, and it's been filmed. We were filming it, we were in it, and even then, just the impact of that, the sound of it, and the way it looked on screen was just immense. And these guys were looking at that and saying, they were in floods of tears. They were like, that is as close as you could ever make it without actually going through it. So yeah, I think, it really had all the ingredients to be as big as it is. It deserves to be as big as it is because it's an amazing story.
Did you guys sit for 10 hours and watch the whole series?
No, they did I think it was episode was it 2 and 3 or 1 and 2? It was 2 hours basically. It was 2 of the episodes. I can't remember which 2. I think it might have been 2 and 3 actually. But anyway, or maybe it was 1 and 2. But whatever it was, the main thing is that the actual landings themselves, the D-Day part was there, and that I think was the key thing for a lot of those guys when they saw that, because that's what they went through, and that was the first time they'd gone into battle, and so Bastogne, sure, that was a very difficult time for them, being stuck in the snow for that whole winter, and being nearly surrounded. That was a brutal time, but they were hardened veterans by then. They'd been through Market Garden, they'd done the D-Day landings, they'd done a lot before they got to Bastogne. And so, it's a different experience for them, very hard, obviously. But I think for the guys watching the first day they went into battle, the first time they ever went into battle together and seeing their buddies die in massive numbers, I think that's why that was such a really intense thing for them to experience and to see. And, it really touched us all. It was a very powerful day that day.
Yeah.
Sadly, Chuck Grant died in 1984. So I never got a chance to speak to him or his family. As you know, we were all given a sort of dossier, a massive file, which was all of the historical research that was done on our character. Each of us got one of these, and luckily, some of the guys could actually speak to the person they were playing, the real guy that they were playing, and others could speak to family. And in some cases, like with Ross, he couldn't get in touch with the Liebgott family. So you just had to make do with what you got. I mean, there was a good amount of stuff on Grant that I was given, and also I spoke to the guys when I met them on the set. Spoke to Garnier, spoke to Heffron, and they were really generous with their time and with what they told us, because it's pretty hard to come back with all those emotions and to bring all that stuff back up in there for them. But they were happy to do it, and everybody on set wanted to speak to them about their experience and about their who they were playing, especially the ones who hadn't had a chance to talk to the real people. So they were really generous with their time on that.
I have a question out of the chat room.
Yeah.
From a lovely girl. Her name's China. She's from Canada. She would like to say, first of all, thank you for stopping in.
That's funny. I know a girl called Canada from China.
No. Are you pulling my leg?
Yes.
What do you think?
You know what? You know what? I used to love you, and now I really love you.
So what is it China from Canada or Canada from China?
China from Canada.
China from Canada. Hi, China from Canada.
Oh, that was nice of you to say hi. She wanted to know what was your favorite memory? Like she said, boot camp, filming, scenes, whatever. What's your fondest?
There's a lot. Obviously, there was a lot of shooting. There was a lot of time spent. I have some great memories from boot camp. I have some great memories from various episodes. There's a bit in episode 3, I think, or 4, where I blow up there's an MG-42, a German machine gun, in a bell tower in a town square, and it's pinned down the rest of our platoon is divided, obviously. We're in, got first platoon, second platoon, and weapons platoon, so the company's divided. And the other guys are pinned down. Buck Compton, I think, is leading them, and he's pinned down on the other side. And I take out the bell tower with a bazooka. And that was a great moment for me because, I hide behind the corner. I'm with Garnier and Popeye. And I kind of poke my head around the corner to see it's clear. The guys they've zoned in on the other platoon, so they're not looking at me. And I pop my head around and take a shot, bang, and of course, I just have a thing in the bazooka which makes a big puff of smoke and makes it look like I fired something. So you kind of half think, well, nothing's going to happen, but of course it does, because they set up all the explosions and they got the stuntmen up there, come around the corner, take a shot, bang, puff of smoke, and boom, the whole bell tower blows up, and 2 guys fall out of it.
That's one of the pictures that you sent us, right?
I think you have one of those, yeah. But I mean, if you see it in the show itself, it's a great moment for me as Chuck, because it's where you actually get to do your stuff. So that was a good memory. Some great times, great times when we were just hanging out together as a cast, just doing our thing. Lots of times when we'd have a massive sequence where we're running across a field and they've got to blow up a whole bunch of stuff, especially with all the tank attacks, where the Sherman tanks come in and push the Germans back in that sequence. That's incredible. I think it's one of the first kind of really massive battle sequences with tanks. And we just had a laugh when we weren't filming and being dead serious about what we were up to. We just had a laugh every day. We just, took the piss out of each other, and hung out and smoked way too many filterless cigarettes and snuck whiskey in our canteens to keep warm. I know Neil did that at boot camp, which was, of course, completely not allowed. But, you're on set and you're freezing cold, a little nip here and there. I mean, but very clever of him to keep it for that long, I have to say. But, yeah, I mean, I think some of the greatest memories were like, we'd be sitting there, we'd have a huge field that we'd just run across and blown to smithereens. When you're standing there waiting to shoot a sequence like that, you've got the whole field ahead of you, and you've got a bunch of red flags sticking in bits of ground that are just flat grass. You've got hedgerow where you are, you've got the enemy on the other hedgerow, you've got a field, you're going to run across it. And they put all the flags in, they say, okay guys, we're going to just walk this one through. Cameraman, director, they come up, you got the whole platoon there marching forward. They say, okay, at this point you're gonna come out of where you're dug in, you're gonna run across this field, and the field is going to get blown to shit, but you're going to charge that position right there and you're going to shoot as you run. And obviously more specific things given to individual actors who are actually going to be in the frame more, but the whole thing is going on. You don't know if the camera's on you or not, you're just living the moment, and that's it. And so you walk back, you get into position, and then they go and take all those flags away. And you're like, oh shit! Wait a minute, was that flag there? Or was it there? Oh, because the flags are where the big explosions are going to happen. You don't want to be running across the middle of a flag, but the flags aren't there when you film. And trying to remember where 20 or 30 flags have been taken away from is no easy feat. So, you just have to hope for the best. You just basically pick a tree and say, right, I'm going from here to that tree, and I don't think there were any flags between here and there, so I should be okay. And off you go. So, the adrenaline of those moments. Of running into battle sequences were great. They were great memories. They really stay with you, those things. You relive them when even just talking about it, I feel my heart racing a bit, and you kind of get back in that moment. But then also, when the dust has settled, the shot's been done, and they're like, okay, we're going to reset, we're going to do it one more time. You're talking about probably 2 or 3 hours to reset that field back to how it was, because it's been blown to shit. So all the guys go and sit down. You don't go back to the honey wagons and go back to the base camp. You hang out like you would if you were a soldier. There was none of that kind of mamby-pamby, go back and, watch movies and stuff. Although I think towards the end of filming, it was allowed a little bit because a lot of people were really knackered and just wanted some downtime. But most of us would just hang out on the set. Me and Dexter and a few others would kick over a couple of ammo crates and just play cards. We'd play poker, and we'd have matchsticks or cigarettes or whatever stuff we had on us, and we just play for whatever we had, and play poker for an hour and just shoot the shit and then get up and do it again. Those memories were great. But I remember those times very clearly. I also had a really amazing experience on the last patrol, the night patrol one, which is when I spent a lot of time with Colin Hanks actually. And he and I did a lot together in that episode. And he was brand new. He'd just come in. Lovely guy, really sweet. Wanted to do the best for us. Realised what we'd been through. Knew he was green, but he's a lieutenant. So coming in and being a lieutenant, is a tough thing to do when you haven't had 7 months of filming with everybody. You've got to suddenly come in and throw orders around and be in a position of command. Pretty tough for him, and he handled it really well. And I got on very well with him, showed him around London, took him out a few times and stuff. But and we've kept in touch since as well. But we had a great time because that was night shooting, and some people hate night shooting because you're knackered, you're up all night, obviously, and but I really love night shoots, and something about the cover of darkness, just being in this, everyone else in the country is probably asleep, and here we are out in the middle of nowhere, out in the sticks, running around shooting machine guns and sleeping in bombed out buildings. And that set was amazing as well. So those were good memories. And the other one I should mention is Interlaken. We all went to Interlaken in Switzerland for the final episode, and those were really good times, because you imagine, you take a bunch of guys, take a platoon of guys who are in the military, and you send them off on a trip away where they're all in one hotel together, and all the local girls know they're there, and you're filming all day. Sure, we're doing all our war stuff all day, but at night we're like, okay, what are we going to do? We've finished filming. What are we up to? And of course, we just took over the bars. We took all the girls, and we really pissed off a lot of local people in Switzerland.
Oh, I bet.
But equally, we brought a lot of fun and a lot of money to the bars as well. We were in there. We were eating out every night in big groups. We were going to all the bars. We were. Any little nook and cranny we could find in that town, we found it.
That was one of Neil McDonough's favorite memories as well.
Was it?
Was up in Switzerland, and especially the shooting the last scene when you guys are all playing baseball.
Oh yeah, absolutely, because by then it's kind of, I guess the sense for the real men was it was the end of the war, and although sadly for Chuck, that was when. His time came. His time was up. Although he survived, he was never the same since. All the guys said that. But in the actual series, Chuck is, they all had to do duties, and it's the end of the war. The Germans have given up. Berchtesgaden is cleared out. Hitler's shot himself. It's done, and. So they're just waiting, really, to get their number to go home. And you can't send everyone in one go. So there's like a lottery system, and everybody gets sent back not in small groups. So you're hoping your number's going to come up so you can get back home. They've been out there for such a long time, I think 11 months at that point. And they, they just wanted to go home. I guess we all felt a little bit like we didn't want it to come to an end, but we were knackered and we'd done a long shoot, and we could see the light at the end of the tunnel too. So that really comes across. There was a lot of celebration, a lot of fun, and we were enjoying the same thing when we were there in Switzerland. I've got this great picture of us. I can't remember. I've got to look it up, but there's a whole bunch of us who went into a Swiss watch shop, and we all bought watches, like 10 of us. Wow. And we're all standing there like 10 wrists all in a row with 10 new watches on, all with like big shit-eating grins on our faces. So, those were nice moments. But I think, for Chuck, he, in the real situation, he was given guard duty, and he's told he's got to go and do a night checkpoint. He's got to look after a night checkpoint. He's like, oh shit, that's the last thing he wants, right? And he goes to this checkpoint, and anyone who's seen it will remember this scene. He goes up, sees at the checkpoint there's a German car and 2 dead bodies on the ground, Germans, and there's also an officer's car and a dead colonel, I think it was. And then there's this drunk GI. This guy's he's from a completely different platoon. I think he's infantry, and he's just lost it. Something's happened. He's got a screw loose. He's had an experience, or something's happened, but he's drunk, and he's shot everybody there, looking for gas, he says. So Chuck sees the situation, and he's a hardened guy. He's had a lot of experience. He goes up and tries to kind of talk the guy down and asks him to give him his weapon. And the guy just takes a random shot, just kind of swings back and goes, I'll get my own gas. Bang! Shoots and clips him in the head. And Grant goes down. And the guys he's with, who are new guys, run up. They get someone to help. Spears is the one in the end who actually pushes really hard to get Grant some help. Goes to one place. The guy can't help him. And he drives him all the way to another town where a brain surgeon wakes him up in the middle of the night and makes him operate. And that's what saved Grant's life. It's that kind of love that they had for each other, that camaraderie, that brothership that they had, was why men like Grant lived.
See, and that was one of the most disturbing and shocking scenes, I think. Outside of the concentration camp itself, you look at that and it's like, what the hell?
Yeah, the tragedy of that is that you fought from D-Day to the very end. It was lucky for me. A lot of guys only got to be in it for the first 2 episodes because they died on D-Day. So, my character, the person I played, the real guy Grant, he made it through the whole war, and that is a real testament to him and his mettle, who he was. Same with Garnier and Heffron and all those guys. They made it through from the very beginning to the very end. Yeah. They weren't replacements. They came in, they fought hard from D-Day to the end of the war, as they were ordered to by Eisenhower and everybody else. And I think that the whole point of that is that you get to the very end of a war and you fought with your pals and you're ready to go home and the war is over. Everyone's put down their guns. The Germans have given up, and to be shot by one of your own men is just one of the most tragic things that could possibly happen to somebody like in that situation. He was days, if not weeks, if not days away from being home. And for that to happen is a real tragedy. And like I said, he wasn't the same again. He lived till 1984, but all the guys said something changed. Because he was a really kind of happy-go-lucky, friendly guy. Everyone loved him, and got on with him. And he was a real down-to-earth kind of person. He just he was a steel worker, a machinist when he was before the war, and he signed up. He signed up as soon as he heard about the paratroopers, and he was ready to go. So, that was a really big moment. It was that in another way was a very poignant memory. It was a very powerful memory for me because it does make sense of it all. You get caught up in shooting and you do all the other stuff. Everyone else is having their moment where they're focused on by the cameras or in the story. And that was my moment at the end, and I suddenly just thought, Jesus Christ, I had been kind of preparing for it. I'd read all about it. I'd done all the research. I'd, read the books and everything. But when it actually came to the night of shooting it, there was something, it just was kind of in a weird way was there with me. I just felt this real sense of the tragedy of what happened. And it was very emotional, it was, a big deal.
For Chuck Grant to go through all of that from boot camp all the way through D-Day to Eagle's Nest, and then take one in the head from an American. I think the true medal in that scene was the fact that Spears didn't kill the guy.
Yeah, absolutely. That is, and you know why? I mean, it's very clear, I suppose, in the actual show. But they all wanted to kill him, but enough killing had been done.
Right.
They had seen 11 months of people being killed, Germans, Americans, whoever. It's a human life, and that hits any soul, no matter how hardened you are. When you experience that, when you go through that. I mean, I haven't myself, but I can imagine having spoken to the guys and read a lot of stuff, and obviously researched during the filming. You can imagine what that must be like. And at the end of a war, when there's just a bloody mess left to clean up, you can understand why he wouldn't want another person injured or killed or anything.
Right.
I mean, they beat the hell out of him, but he survived.
Well, that was just good old-fashioned fisticuffs.
Yeah, exactly. No bottles were broken over anyone's head, so
exactly.
it's all's fair in love and war, as they say.
Well, this is probably the best time that we'll get.
Yeah.
And it's very apropos that we end up here. But the final question of the evening, which I'm sure if you've listened to any of the interviews, you know what's coming. How would you sum up the heroes of Easy Company, the real men of Easy Company, and the heroes that you portrayed? How would you sum those guys up? Well,
I've heard various people say various things, and some have put it into one word. I think ultimately, having met them and having somehow lived as close as we can in the film world through their experiences, I would just say that they are, that they are men with extreme bravery and courage, and and they changed the face of the world. People like Garnier and Babe Heffron. And the amazing thing about the Second World War, that particular part of it especially, is that, it brought people together. That's why it's called Band of Brothers, because it brought people together in the world, the whole world. That's why it's a world war, right? Everyone was fighting a common enemy. And that doesn't really exist in the same way. It hasn't since. It doesn't exist now. And I think that what it really shows is the true mettle of not just one man, but of men, of the capability that they have to band together. And that's happened through time, through since mankind kind of came out of the caves. There have been moments where man's mettle has been tested. I don't just mean men, I mean men and women, I mean mankind. Because there were a lot of women involved, obviously, in the Second World War as well. And I think to try and sum it up, which is very hard to do because it's such a huge epic thing, I would just say that these guys were absolute legends. They were heroes. And we owe everything that we know today to their contribution, their efforts. Because the world would be a very different place, I think, if the war had turned out differently, and it could have. Hitler was really pushing hard. He was close to achieving his goal.
Mm-hmm. He was what, 2 weeks away from completing the German A-bomb?
Yeah, exactly, and also the invasion of England was coming close too. They tried once. They had actually ordered the invasion of the UK, but because of the RAF, they couldn't do it. They couldn't break down the RAF. But the RAF was near to busted when they stopped the invasion plan. They said they were stopping it indefinitely. But in fact, if there had been a bit more time and the Americans hadn't got involved and Japan hadn't bombed Pearl Harbor, etc., then it would have been a very different outcome, I think. And it suddenly became, apparent that something had to be done on all sides. And that's it. I mean, that's what the world now would be. Like I said, a very, very different place if it hadn't been for men like Chuck Grant and like Popeye Wynn and Babe Heffron and Garnier and Lipton and Powers and Winters and all those guys. Without their effort, without their contribution, without their courage and their bravery and their just doggedness, we might all be speaking German,
right?
And clicking our heels, and
it's been absolutely amazing you coming on and telling us all these stories, because something we've learned from doing all this, the shared experience of being part of the Band of Brothers just makes for that many different stories from the exact same experience.
Yeah.
And we've had such an amazing time talking with as many cast members as we've had the opportunity to.
God, if you got all these guys in a room and gave them some drinks and sat them around, we could talk about this stuff for days, because there were so many experiences, so many good times, so many dark times, difficult times, and so many memories that you could go on for a very long time covering it all. But I think one thing I will say is that to all the guys out there who are listening to these interviews, it was a real pleasure to be a part of something with you all, and I hope we all see each other more in the future, and I hope to be able to get out there to the States and see the guys out there and join them for their barbecue sometime as well. But it was a great experience, and I was very lucky to be involved, and we all feel that. It's a once in a lifetime experience.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
All the best.